aspects of mindfulness which are not just about productivity and performance, but about the outcomes that an organization desires. So, for today's discussion, I am kind of keeping it, centered around the work which has been done in the last 20-25 odd years, both in the Western space as well as in India. Uh, Less in India, mostly on the Western side, but things that have been done, have been thought, and how mindfulness is or awareness is being looked at from different perspectives. So I have a small presentation I'll share. I would suggest that we are many members over here, and I will request Dr. Tripti to help me in this. If you have questions, just type it on the chat window. I think that would be the easiest way to communicate because these online platforms make us a little bit of a handicap in terms of being able to ask questions in a flow and create a classroom kind of an environment. But do type in the questions and we can take on one by one. Dr. Tripti, I will need your help there. Will it be okay?
Yes. Yes, what we'll be doing is that the participants may be raising their hands and we'll be making them presenters because there are quite a lot and but all of them as presenters and access to chat box will create a little bit of difficulty, but we'll try both the methods, whatever is
Oh,
applicable.
okay.
Yeah.
Raise the hands is also okay. All right. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So everybody can see my screen.
Yes, we can see participants.
Yeah. Okay.
Good
Okay.
morning.
So
Yeah, sir, your the screen is visible.
thank you so
I
much.
request the participants to, yeah, please close their, unmute themselves, mute themselves. Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. Okay. So today's subject is interesting and it is quite intertwined in the sense that when we talk about awareness, it begins from the self and it goes out in the uh, ecosystem and the surroundings that we live in. So, it is quite difficult to address this subject just from an external point of view or an internal point of view. And if we look at awareness, it's, typically the questions that come to our mind is what to be aware of, how to be aware of. Uh, in the what itself, there'll be so many questions. So, it's awareness is also about questioning. It's about deep questioning of things that exist within or without, uh, inside or outside. So it's just quite an intertwined aspect of how it actually arises in humans. In fact, humans are the most aware, right? That's how we know it, that we are the ones who are able to consciously look at multiple dimensions and consciously look at things from multiple standpoints, multiple viewpoints. So it is quite interesting to say that how does the process of awareness start and where does it start and what it ends with, what it begins with. So let's deep dive into a little bit of how the whole thing evolves and what are some of the things that I have looked at in last 2 years of my own research and have been conceptualizing a little bit from different aspects. So some of it is my work in the last 2 years. Of course, all of you are much more learned. I'm just still a student. But my own reflections and my own points of view that I have developed in the last 2 years or so, and some of it from the literature, particularly from Carl Weick and some of the others who have deeply looked at this subject. So, to begin with, let's look at mindfulness as to what exactly it is. Of course, it can't be defined so simply because there are several states of being when we are talking about mindfulness and consciousness and at a deeper level, the awareness of being and surroundings. but simply understood from a day-to-day or everyday perspective of work, workplaces, social settings. If you look at mindfulness, it's basically about, and I like this definition from Brown. Uh, it's about receptive attention. Now, the moment I say receptive attention, there's already, as I was saying, something has got mixed up. Receptive attention, which means I'm receiving something, and that something may be an object outside or an object inside. Now, from others' point of view, and from the social point of view, these may be the stimuli which I am receiving from outside. However, there is a nuance here in the attention. The attention is also colored by my own opinion, and we see all kinds of colors as we look at our own selves and outside in the world. So the attention may be colored with my own vision, with my own opinion, although I'm looking at objects outside, but in a sense, I might also be looking at it through the colors of my own eyes, or through the biases of my own attention. So receptive attention means, in a way, receiving and not trying to judge. So that is where the first aspect of mindfulness comes, that when I'm observing something and observing it deeply, I suspend my judgment, or I don't use my judgment, and I receive the information as it is. There's lots of work done in Eastern, Western space on this particular subject, and there are various methods and ways of practicing that. So, my attention when I'm studying this subject is also not just understanding it, but also practicing it to kind of understand not just the theoretical aspects, but also maybe in practice, how to bring this mindfulness, how do you suspend judgment, how do you uh, practice receptive attention. So receptive attention is the key thing here, and that is the first aspect. Now, if you look at attention, attention is a very interesting thing, and we all know, and all of you would have researched it. Some of you might have researched it deeply in this age and setting, or the social setting, or the modern setting. The attention span is the one which has taken the maximum toll, and it pains me when I look at children around, and uh, the way they kind of get attached to things. 8 seconds of attention, research is telling us that it's even less than 8 seconds, actually 7 seconds. So how do we develop this aspect of receptive attention, not just in work settings in organizations, but also deeply in the society itself? Society which is going through this major attention deficit, and we see all these disorders which are getting generated because of that. uh, so receptive attention, that is the first aspect. And receptive attention, can it be trained? Yes, it can be trained. Are there methods of training it? Yes, there are methods of training it. And the aspect of suspending judgment while you're receiving information or observing something through the either the senses or the mind itself, yes, there are mechanisms. So receptive attention is the first aspect. Second aspect is that of awareness. Now, what is awareness? And this is again a very interesting question. Uh, what is awareness? I would have loved to interact with this whole class at this point of time, but because this is the subject that we are going to deep dive today, because I'm sure attention was already discussed in the sessions yesterday. So awareness is very interesting. Some people say that if I'm observing something outside, and let's say a person or a sorry a person, an object, um, an ecosystem, an organization, people in organization, there may be any object of attention. So what is awareness in that situation? It's the presence. It's about no previous uh, baggage of any information, and no future projection of that baggage that I might carry. And therefore, awareness is about that present event and experience. That's the awareness. So, when we talk about empathy, we talk about several aspects of social behavior, um, in terms of interacting with people. That is the basic aspect. That when I'm meeting, and specifically from the point of view of us scholars, and from the point of view of people who practice counseling, people who practice coaching, etc. I'm sure many of you would be doing that, and so many students you would be attending to. Uh, the aspect of bringing presence, not being uh, not being carrying that baggage of information from the past, is one of the most important aspects of awareness. So awareness, therefore, is again a word which I think we need to look at it deeply. It is not just knowing what is happening outside, but being aware of what is happening, how is it happening, and completely being in that present moment of what causes that and how it is happening, and without the previous baggage of what has happened in the past. So while all the antecedents and consequences are very important, all the antecedents and consequences are very important. It's not that we leave the antecedents and we leave the consequences of any activity or event which is happening outside, but it is also very important that we look at that moment itself, and that is the aspect of awareness which is so important when we look at mindfulness as a whole concept. So receptive attention again asks me to do something, uh, uh, me in myself, and which is about being receptive, being open, being non-judgmental, and presence, which is about being nowhere else but in being in that present moment. So, whether we look at it from a Western point of view or a Eastern school point of view, all the schools essentially converge on this point, that there are two aspects. One aspect is that of attention, and the other aspect is that of awareness. When we talk about attention, it has got something to do with me and my ability to attend to objects or situations or people uh, in the most receptive mode. And awareness is about being present, is about the moment in which the observation is being made without carrying the baggage. So that's the theoretical background of awareness and mindfulness, and the way we act with mindfulness. Now, there's a whole aspect of application of this concept in organizations, and several organizations have already also been studied from the different perspectives of but others I will try to kind of point you to the literature where possibly you might get some help. In fact, some of these people are great people to read on mindfulness, which I have also quoted here. So moving on, now when we uh, know that these are some of the aspects, what do we attend to, and what do we get aware of when we look at the social settings or the organization settings or people at large. And I think let's deep dive into that particular area. Although, as I said, it will be quite convoluted, because mindfulness, attention, awareness, it's so mixed up. Without awareness, there's no attention. And without attention, there can't be awareness. So, it's so convoluted and mingled up. And collectively, in another term, it can be called consciousness. uh, you know it can be called consciousness collectively in another term, but and it's not, the process is not known, sometimes the antecedents are not known, sometimes the consequences are not known, but uh, it happens. We know when the awareness happens, and mostly it will happen in the moment of truth, or the particular experience that we are going through, when the baggage
Yes,
is suspended. So that's the point, but we'll try to focus on only the awareness aspect today, and from a social context. And from the social context, I will try to talk about organizations, which I think I have a little bit of deep knowledge by way of working as a consultant. So I will talk a little bit about that. Okay, so
actually,
now just, sorry,
yeah.
somebody has a question?
May I say something?
Yes, certainly, sir.
Uh, Yesterday also I asked this question to Dr. Mohit.
Hmm.
It is little difficult to understand that how mindfulness is different from being conscious. Because
Very true, sir.
whenever we are conscious, we are aware about ourselves, where you are putting a new point of your attention and other thing. It depends on the individual, what he wants to attend to. Because sometimes we
Absolutely.
see that his attention is somewhere else and we say that you are not mindful.
Mm,
So sometimes I feel that this whole, I will not say business of mindfulness, but this whole concept is a reinventing in a way where we have already explored a lot in consciousness studies and its structures and all those things. So I want to understand
mm,
that how it is really different from that old school of consciousness, where we always talk about for being a conscious, you need to be a cognitively aware, where the attention comes, perception comes, all these perceptual processes come. So that I want to understand.
mm. I think, sir, that's a very pertinent question, and thank you for asking that question. In fact, in my own time and in my own research, I'm trying to uh, understand that. Although my PhD is also getting delayed because of that, but I'm trying to understand this whole aspect of uh, consciousness and how consciousness actually happens. Now, uh, first question is mindfulness doing is a subset of very deep research, which is already there in some form of the other. Yes, it is. So, any literature that I read, and I will take the liberty to say that here, any literature that I read, whether it is the Kashmiri traditions or the Vipassana tradition, or, I practice Vipassana, the Vipassana tradition, or I look at the Western text of, any of the religious texts or any of the aspects of wherever I read, it's actually this, everybody is saying the same thing. So, consciousness has been deeply understood, studied, practiced by people, but and all the work that we see on mindfulness is a subset of that. There's no doubt about it. So, after studying it for last 4 or 5 years in a little bit of detail, I can say safely that mindfulness or awareness that we are talking about today, which has become a little bit of fashion, is definitely a subset of the consciousness that we have been looking at. Whether we look at Western, some of the Western writers writing about awareness or practicing of some techniques of consciousness. For example, I know a whole concept of breathing, which has become instant hit in some of the Western geographies and also in the Eastern aspects. So this has been done in the past by people all across the world, not just in one particular location. So consciousness is the root. Now, consciousness, the way I have understood, is about again the I would try to explain it from the point of view of stimulus response and the delay in response. So there is a whole external world and there is a whole internal world that we live in, and it is full of the stimuli that we generate internally, or and the responses that we generate. So stimulus can be internal or external, coming from outside in the ecosystem, from the society, from the people around us, family, etc. We receive it as a signal, we process it, and we respond to it. Now, consciousness lies somewhere in between this stimulus and response. I think the eighth habit of Stephen Covey also points to this direction. Uh, the eighth habit also points to this direction, but it doesn't go deep enough. Now, if we look at that delay, where what happens in that delay, maybe we will be able to understand it a little bit deeply, at least theoretically. But I think I'm sure it will come with it'll actually come with a lot of practice. So what happens in this that delay when the stimulus has come and I'm not reacting? So there are two things which will typically happen. Number one, in the delay, I will observe. Uh, I will observe the situation, maybe a little more objectively. So maybe I'll become equanimous. So observation causes equanimity. That slowly that sensation dies away, and that realization dies away, or that stimulus loses its strength. So that is one thing which happens. So that is one aspect of things that happens in the delay. The second aspect that will happen typically in that particular space is acceptance, and maybe that equanimity comes because of the acceptance that something is happening outside or something is happening inside is also going to go away. So maybe I don't need this particular iPhone that I'm planning to buy, at this stage. And maybe I can postpone it for 3 months. So that suddenly that attention or awareness in between the stimulus and response, which is caused by the delay, makes me mindful or conscious. So I think these are some of the aspects which will happen. And also physically I may feel more control. So it's a strange combination of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual uh, aspects of myself, which come together to help me become more conscious. It's not just the body, it's not just the mind, it's not just the spirituality in me, and it's not just the emotionality in me, but it's a coming together of all four. So for example, I'm sure everyone would have observed, everyone would of us would have observed. Let's say we have a sudden anxiety, and there's something which is palpitating here. So your physical body is responding, and mental body is responding. There's a lot of movement inside the mind, and emotional body is responding. There are some, let's say, apart from the palpitation, I also feel some kind of perspiration in my arms and hands or somewhere. So, and of course the spiritual body is getting disturbed in the sense that it is losing control and balance. So uh, all these four in a certain way come together, and I would say even anxiety is a state of mindfulness. It's just a continuum. It's not just that one end, that supreme consciousness, but the entire journey from left to right is nothing but a continuum of consciousness. It's not that consciousness is only at one extreme, it's also at the other extreme. So all the four coming together in a strange combination, and that is based, as you rightly said, on the individual attention and choice. Individual attention and choice plays a role, because I may be worried about something, somebody else may be worried about something else. So the combination of four things creates that moment of consciousness, and it is triggered by that awareness, which happens between the stimulus and response. And life is full of stimuli and responses. uh, some are delayed, some are immediate. Certain things we react immediately, and so we lose the opportunity of being mindful or aware. So uh, the 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 aspect of delay in between that stimulus and response, and coming together of in a strange way of the four bodies, in that sense of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, to form a reaction, or to form a conscious moment or an aware moment. That is how I look at it. It is a little convoluted in my own mind also right now to admit, because I'm still working on this subject. I'm trying to do it both from the practice perspective as well as from the understanding perspective. So that is how I look at it. Does that answer your question slightly? Okay. Okay. So moving forward. So
Sir, may I interrupt, sir? You, sir? Hello, sir. May I
yes, I can
interrupt?
hear you. Yes,
Sir, in
certainly.
fact, sir, thank you, sir. In fact, you have mentioned that mindfulness is a reception, attention to, and awareness of present events. So, sir,
Yes.
what about, sir, this futuristic aspect and this past aspect?
So as I was saying, when we look at something from a colored or a biased mind, that is what causes mind to drift away. When we look at either antecedent or consequence. So let me try to explain that a little more simply. Let's say, I'm running a business. So let me take my example. Let's say I'm running a business of consulting. People know me for certain kind of work that I am doing in the industry, and I reach to a client, a completely fresh client, who has, let's say, some HR related problems that I'm trying to solve. Now I have this entire baggage from the past of my expertise, problems that I have solved in the last 20 years that make me an expert. That's why in the first place I'm there in that conversation. But this problem is fresh. The problem that my client is sharing with me is a fresh problem. It's their problem that is now. If I put this entire baggage of problems that I've solved in the past on this present solution, maybe I'll not do justice to it. Similarly, the future is uncertain. There's no event that you can project with 100% uh, accuracy that this will happen. We have all been living in ambiguity for the last 1 year because of Corona and COVID, etc. I can't say that any event in the future is going to certainly happen. Uh, and if I can't project, then I need not be worried about it so much. So everything that I think usually in a human mind, what happens is everything is either associated to a past or future. So either my past experience or my future expectation. That is one problem in mindfulness. The second problem is attachment to the pleasure and pain. The events that caused pleasure for me in the past and the events that may cause pleasure to me in the future, and the pain associated, the events that created pain to me, either emotional pain or physical pain, or may cause pain to me in the future. Now, this is where my vision or uh, observation, when I say vision, my observation gets colored. This is the first place where bias starts happening. Now, the whole concept of awareness, mindfulness, and consciousness, I will use all three words together, is to bring my attention to the present, leave the baggage of the past, and leave the expectation of the future. Leave the experience of pleasure and pain and focus completely on the now, which is happening, even if it is bad. So whether it is good or bad doesn't matter. So you are equanimously looking at that event without getting that color. That is awareness. So mindfulness, in a way, is also mind emptiness. So mind is not processing. Uh, if we understand it from a little bit from an Eastern psychology perspective, there are two entities, the mind and the conscious. I'm sorry, there's a little bit of noise in the background. If somebody has switched on their microphone, could you please put it on silent?
Rahul, please take care of this. Anil Kumar, I think you're.
Okay. So, so there are two entities, the mind and the conscious. The previous participant who was also asking a similar question. There are two entities, the mind and the conscious. The more the mind works, the less the conscious happens. The less the mind works, the more the conscious happens. So that is the fundamental aspect of mindfulness. Now, when does the mind work more? The mind works more when it is too associated with the past or it is too expectant of the future. It is too conscious, no conscious in a different sense, but it is too conscious of the pleasure and pain or things that can happen to me as an individual. So I will observe less and less. I will protect myself more and more. So in a situation, let's say when I'm in a, let's say, in a forest and a lion attacks me, my entire attention is to protecting myself and I don't observe anything around. Let's say the lion goes away, then there is a lake, there is a hill, there are lots of trees, and I start enjoying them. So that is the aspect with awareness and consciousness, that I get I switch on my protective gear, which is my mind, immediately as I sense there is a problem which can happen to me, or I can gain something out of this deal. So both pleasure and pain and past and future, they cause the mind to work. The entire 99% of the attention of the mind is with these four. It's preoccupied with past, it's preoccupied with future, it's preoccupied with the pleasure and pain. However, mindfulness or consciousness is about releasing that completely and being in the present moment as it is. And there are several stories that we have uh, from Jesus's life, from Buddha's life, which tell us a little bit about that consciousness or mindfulness. But uh, uh, that, in a sense, is the aspect of awareness: being present, not in the past, not in the future. Suspending judgment, not suspending judgment on my pleasure and pain. It's not about the past, it's not about the future. Then I see the object as it is. Then I see as it is. And that as it isness is awareness. I mean, I can suggest an exercise which I usually do when I go to some kind of a nature walk. Uh, just go and try to walk through the trees as if you can feel them, and that is where when you start feeling them, then you suddenly realize that okay, my awareness is also increasing. It's not just about the whole beautiful view out there, but there's a lot more things that are happening out there. When you're looking at the lake without an expectation for it to be beautiful or not to be beautiful, and then you're just walking there, observing your breath and just walking into the nature. That's the moment when you get that awareness where there's no baggage of the past and there is no baggage of the future. So dissociation from past and future is a necessary condition for awareness, to answer your question in one line. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So going deeper a little bit, and this comes from Carl Weick's work. In fact, he's written. I suggest all of us also download it and read it. Organizing for Mindfulness: Eastern Wisdom and Western Knowledge. So he has beautifully captured some of the things about mindfulness, and at least from an organizational perspective, and the way we're going to apply it to organizations, or the way current research is applying it to organization. There are lots of things that are happening in this space. A lot of things are convoluted also. The moment something becomes bigger, it starts getting convoluted. So that's okay. But that apart, what is the Western thought and what is the Eastern thought? Uh, so Western thought is about is be with the eyes open. With the eyes open, you see the world, differentiate, classify, refine. Whatever you're doing, the way you approach science, in the way we approach any kind of study, mostly even here in India as well, we try to dissect, we try to converge, we try to diverge, we do all kinds of analysis. So that is the way of Western, that is the meaning of Western observation, which is nuanced judgment. You enhance, keep on increasing the nuances of your judgment, go deeper and deeper into the subject, try to see deeper and deeper, from the molecule go to the atom, from the atom go to the quarks, from the quarks go to these strings, and so on and so forth, right? That is the way of Western wisdom or knowledge when it comes to awareness. Deeper and deeper attention on one object. So, as a researcher of nuclear sciences or nuclear physics, will go deeper from molecules to atoms to quarks to strings and so on and so forth. I don't know what all. And a researcher of Eastern thought will just so with the closed eyes and in the state of awareness where there's thoughtlessness. So this is a very interesting word: mental wobbling, and increasing the time period of attention. So what is happening here is you are trying to get to a state of thoughtlessness, which is about no judgment. You're trying to increase the time span of your attention, and you are trying to reduce mental wobbling. Now, wobbling is basically all the thoughts that you get. If I tell everybody now to close your eyes and sit for a minute, within 5 seconds or 6 seconds, you will see your mind has wandered away. It has gone to something to do with the house, to do with your students, for some assignments, etc. So mind moves away, and that is wobbling. So you try to reduce the wobbling. And as you reduce wobbling and you increase the time period of attention, that moment of awareness is essentially being mindful or being aware. So that is how these two are slightly different directions. And to the also to answer one of the questions which was asked first, this is what is difference between mindfulness and consciousness. That one is moving towards more nuanced judgment, the other is moving towards a state of being, of state of no judgment. So and being completely present. So this is the direction which things are going, and you would see several businesses springing up in both these spaces. So there's so many businesses which have come up now, which preach, teach, and help people practice mindfulness. And consequences, of course, we will see in another 25 years. But that is how the world is progressing right now. Now, moving on to look at this from the organizational perspective. We meet people in organization, and it is very, very important to uh, outwardly project the attention and awareness from an applicability perspective, from a social perspective. So this is the work that I have been trying to kind of do and write a few things about it, and also try to research a little bit uh, from both the organizational perspective as well as from a individual and team mindfulness perspective. So the object of attention is the activity. So in an organization, or even if we look at our own organization, it is sum total of all the activities that are happening in the organization. Those activities are routinized. So for example, we go and take classes in a routine manner. We do certain administrative activities in a routine manner. We do certain all the activities of the organization in some kind of a routinized manner. So the quantum unit of action in a social or organizational context, even in social context, we celebrate festivals at a certain routinized, in a certain routinized manner over a year. Let's say there are certain festivals which keep coming every year. The times of the year are also routinized. Certain, let's say, financial year ends in March, so that's a routine we have created socially. So socially and organizationally, we have converted life into routines in a way, and these routines are the points of observation. So externally oriented, wherever the activity is happening, the action is happening, that is the point of observation. Usually those points of observation we have divided into roles. For example, in a family there's a role of a father. In the organization there may be a role of a CEO. In the institution or university that you are part of, you may be a professor. So these are roles, but there are a host of interconnected tasks, events, and people which are coming together to make that event happen, and also is a source of a lot of stimulus. We almost live 95% of our lives, or maybe even more, in this stimulus. All of us spend like 8-10 hours in our work, maybe more, at least 8-10 hours. Uh, and we spend a lot of time with our family, we spend a lot of time with our friends outside in the society, and there is a lot of interconnectedness to tasks, events, and the stimulus which is coming in from outside. So those or activities, either from organizational or social context, is the point of observation. That point of observation, of course, has antecedent, of course, has consequence. It is not in isolation, but it's all connected, and a lot of things are happening like a continuous stream. So if I am an observer from outside and I'm watching, I might almost feel like like uh, I'm watching this a new webcast, Amazon, and I don't know what all. So there are lots of these series, web series, etc. So it almost will look like a web series which is passing in front of me. It'll look like a continuous stream, but there will be specific instances which I get to observe. I will be able to observe deeply. Awareness, of course, we have discussed, is about the self, others, and the ecosystem. And attention, of course, is the active observation of the relevant subject matter. So let's say, for example, my role is to look after the finance balance sheet of my company. I will look at it and attend to it. and that is where my attention will be mostly pointed towards. So attention and awareness pointed to my set of activities or my either designated or undertaken roles is where my attention and awareness is pointed towards. Now, uh, the cause of stimuli is therefore mostly others. 95% of the time, the stimuli is mostly coming through others. And in such a situation, what should I do? How should I look at these external stimulus? And to the question we were asking previously, how do we leave the past and the future? Because it's so specific, there is an antecedent, there is a consequence of whatever I'm going to do. So how do I disconnect myself from those antecedents and consequences while still focus on the activity that I'm doing? So that's the important aspect. Now, this is where most of the management systems and organization systems start failing because activity is so specific, system is so aggregate. Activity is like almost every split second, and management system of observation or reporting is always so aggregate. We see a lot of digital transformation happening, but it is so disconnected. And so therefore, how do I bring attention? If you see factory workers, or let's say engaged in manufacturing a car, there's almost an opera which is running. It almost looks like an opera. A car is being manufactured and there is an assembly line. The components are coming together, and at the end there is a car which is going out. So it's almost like almost like an opera that you're watching. But if you look at that situation deeply, what is happening? Each activity, there is somebody who is giving an attention to it in the most nuanced manner possible. The attention is causing some component to come together with another component, and then they move together, and then there is a third component which is coming. That person who is working on that line, according to me, is deep in the meditation with the system that he or she is running. Uh, he or she is completely aware, attentive to that activity, while at the same time is aware of the next component. He or she can't delay. So I have assembled or put together one component. Now it moves forward. There's a third component coming in. So there is a time lag and a delay. This awareness of the next activity, overlap of my activities, overlap of my situation with others' situation is awareness. So in the sense of ecosystem and others. So what is it that I am doing? How does it connect to the larger world? Is the aspect of awareness when we look at it organizationally, that what will it go and fit into? Where will it go next? What can it harm? What consequences can happen? So now in this particular situation, we have expanded that aspect of individual awareness to a little more consequence as well. So this is where you will see a split of thought actually, that so far we have been talking about awareness as present, but now we are talking about the whole ecosystem, that I'm aware what is going to happen after my action. But at the same time, if you look at it deeply enough, it's still my own self-awareness, because I'm still living in that present moment. My activity is happening in present. If I do the activity correctly, then the impact will be right. So the attention and awareness still fixated on the action that I'm taking now, which is going to make an impact on a future activity. So uh, the this has to be understood a little deeply, that while I'm talking about an interconnected system of things that are going to happen, we are still actually talking about the same attention and awareness. Awareness is coming from the fact that there is an ecosystem, there are others, and I'm trying to understand what are their needs. And on the other hand, I am also trying to make sure that whatever I'm attending to is done properly. So they are in a way coming together to make certain outcomes happen. And from an organizational sense, it brings in a whole lot of people who are trying to understand, or I'm aware of, as a department, let's say finance, I'm aware of HR, I'm aware of operations, I'm aware of maintenance, what people go through. In general terms, we may call all this empathy, that I'm empathetic. But if I look at it very deeply, inside that empathy, I'm aware of my own task and its consequence. If I do, if I fix the two components well together, there are chances that things in the future will follow uh, also. So in a way, now imagine the two boundaries. This is my boundary and this is somebody else's boundary. It is all coming together and overlapping. So I'm aware of the overlapping boundaries, that why by my action, how will the other benefit or not benefit. So that's the overlap that we are being aware of. So I'm not living this life as a single cell. There are multiple cells, there are multiple people, uh, and those multiple people have their own boundaries and their own constructs. So I always interface with many others, and in those interfaces my freedom is also integrated with them, and uh, in that integration is where I start to practice awareness, that okay, my this action, how will it impact the other, this action, how will it impact the other. So so that's the aspect of awareness when it comes to a social setting. uh, in this particular example it is more work setting, but in the social setting these overlaps of over awareness, so my awareness was and somebody else's awareness has an overlap. It's, I think it is also simply understood if we look at the constitution. It talks about freedom. It talks about, let's say, freedom of speech. My freedom of speech ends where somebody else's freedom comes into picture. So in a way, two people in the society have overlapping freedoms. Being aware that overlap of freedom is the aspect of awareness when we talk about awareness from a social perspective. So that overlap is what, if we are aware of, our own action or attention will work differently. So we talk about more aware citizens, right? Citizen awareness. So what is citizen awareness? It's nothing but being aware of my overlap with the others in the society, and then being attentive to make sure that my job is done the way it is specified to be done, with being completely aware of the situation. Now I have used a word role here instead of a task uh, in the attention, because tasks may be sometimes written down, but roles cannot be written down. You know, it may be much more than the task. So for example, the let's say in the last year, there is a SOP for the hospitals. Tasks are jotted down, everything is there. But when we had this pandemic, a lot of things changed, and people just assumed their roles. Researchers started researching about the vaccine. Hospitals started attending to the patients, and so on and so forth. People started assuming their roles, even though nothing was written. You know, even though there was no SOP in certain situations. So role is a much larger frame. Things are not written down so clearly. Both has and this word role is very important in a social setting. That I am playing a role, which means there are others also. So vis-a-vis those others, how aware I am of others' role, how aware of I am of my role, not just the task and activity, is the aspect of awareness which will make me more attentive. And that attentiveness again will bring me to the present of being able to direct me to do the job properly, or whatever I have undertaken properly. So in a way, it initially looks like I'm putting consequences and antecedents to the act, but at the end of the day, if I look at it deeply enough, it still is that moment. That's what I was trying to say here. Now, moving from organizational context a little more deeply and what has happened. Now, this is the place where it has been most researched. It is called HROs, high reliability organizations. Sorry.
May I say something? Yeah.
Sure, sure. Sorry.
Uh, what I understand is that we as a human being are by and large a conscious being where we are aware of ourselves and our surrounding. If I'm correct, what you are suggesting is that in an organization settings, we need to be little more conscious and attentive and keeping in mind the consequences. Let's say in an organization setting, I have a few suggestions to my director. I feel that this is the way he should act. But I am not suggesting him because I feel that he may feel bad, he is not open to new ideas. So if you are
Correct.
getting more attentive and if you want to do something and if you are not able to do, then it will create more of a restlessness. Whereas
Yes.
this mindfulness is to help people to manage them in a better way.
Very true. I think that's a
And
very, very true, yeah, take.
yeah, so basically, in this mindfulness thing which we are doing now, it's the next stage of mindfulness. Now, people are not talking about mindfulness. Now, they have coined a new terms that is the heartfulness.
Hmm.
Heartfulness institutes and all those things are there. It's a reinventing the wheel. So,
Yes.
so there I see that we are not in peace with ourselves. If the mindfulness and heartfulness is, and this all this vipassana and all these exercises are there, it's not leading us anywhere because after doing all this reinventing, in the end we are reaching where we started. As you said, that as more going into the deep, I
Yeah.
am finding it's the same thing.
Correct.
So on that,
Absolutely.
like in organization setting, I feel that no, it's people are if they are more mindful, they are more disturbed.
Hmm.
So I would like to reflect on this because I'm really glad that you are here because so I would like to know what are your thoughts on it. And I think this is one of the best sessions we are attending. Other sessions are also great, but this topic is very interesting. That's why I'm saying. So please, if you can reflect on that.
Yes. Let me share from my own experience on this. Of course, there's a lot of literature as well. Uh, dissonance. Dissonance is a very interesting thing. The moment there's a dissonance in the mind, it can be on any aspect.
Hmm.
Dissonance causes restlessness. And you would see that if we go deeply into dissonance itself, there is a conflict. That
But it's not a
conflict,
dissonance. It's not a,
hmm,
two
hmm,
attitudes or something on a one
no,
particular event or something. It's just a indecisiveness that
yes,
keeping in mind as oh, even if I'm not suggesting what will happen, it's fine.
hmm,
But
hmm,
it's better.
hmm,
So it's not. I don't see it as a dissonance, but it's more of a situational analysis that whether I should do that or not.
hmm, hmm. Yeah, so yeah, so okay, so I was using the word dissonance from the perspective that whether I will take an action or not take an action. So that's the, I was not talking about cognitive dissonance so much, but
Mhm.
dissonance from the point that whether I take an action or I don't take an action. So let's say I'll take my own example. Yesterday I went, my daughter wanted to buy some books. I parked my car, and incidentally in Bhopal the parking fee is 5 rupees. This guy gives me an old chit, and you know how these people behave, right? So he behaved exactly the same way, and I just took it. I knew that what he's doing is wrong, but I just went to the shop. I said, let me come back and then deal with it. So I came back. Now, here is the point of decision, whether I shout at him, fight with him, or I should just pay 10 rupees or 20 rupees to him. Now, whether I'll take that action or not. Okay, I choose to take that action. Now, how deeply will I go with that action? So there are layers of truth, right? So first truth that I observed is the person is cheating me. Now in that situation of cheating, how do I act? Should I submit to that cheating, or should I act and stand for the truth? So I am talking about the dissonance from an action perspective, and this dissonance from an action perspective is because of what I perceive as true or right versus what others may perceive as right or true. That is one situation. Second is what I perceive and as true from one standpoint versus what I perceive as true from another standpoint. So that conflict can also happen within me. It may not just be outside. So from one standpoint, from a practical standpoint, I'll say, okay, fine, 10 rupees, just I don't want to waste my time. From another perspective, no. My one act of paying him 10 rupees means that he will cheat 20 others or 100 others. So that's another standpoint. So conflict can happen within me or with me and outside. Now, why is this dissonance on action happening? Because of the perceived nature of truth. So perceived nature of truth, what I feel as true or right versus, let's say, somebody else perceiving as right or true. So that is where I feel, this is my feeling, it's not my conclusion, this is my feeling, this is the starting place of that conflict. Now I may choose different paths, but over a period of time, if I observe that if I've deviated, I'm trying to get a little philosophical here, but I'm sorry for that, this is not a class on that. But if I have deviated too much of truth, that restlessness will keep increasing. If I'm, let's say, in this case you're saying it's a director, but let's say in a political scenario, when I know I'm voting in a wrong way, over a period of time it will create a lot of restlessness, and then that restlessness a lot of times becomes social revolutions, etc., etc. So uh, the ultimately we have to come back to our centering, and the centering can never be uh, uh, away, too far away from the way nature works. So for example, nature says, uh, do not accumulate, right? Nature never accumulates. Uh, it itself processes everything again and again. We are here for a certain period of time, we go, and then new people come in. So nature says don't accumulate, we accumulate. So that is the first point of dissonance. uh, and then in that accumulating and accumulating and accumulating, we accumulate so much of pain as well as pleasure, of course, that it fills us up. Now ultimately we have to go towards nature. Nature says, okay, don't accumulate, you will be most happy, don't accumulate your past, don't accumulate your future, be in the present. The action you have taken, own it. First of all, accept it. Whether I go to the director or not go to the director, that's not the question. I accept it. I acted this way. It was good, bad, without the judgment of good or bad. So the moment I accept and I'm centered, I will see that I've suddenly become aware. So judgment is the problem. The rightness of the situation or the wrongness of the situation. The issue is with the judgment in awareness. So I'm not talking about social rights or social wrongs, but I'm just talking about awareness. The issue with awareness is the judgment. The moment I drop the judgment and accept, that is where I'm centered again. Because acceptance
Sir,
is the nature. Yeah.
can I ask? Sir, the point here is that you are talking about the truth of A person and truth of B person, your truth and his truth. But what is the
Right.
universal truth in this case?
Okay. I think that is a very tough question. I have a uh,
Because he
but
is
let
ultimately
me.
cheating, na?
Yeah.
Sir, I
Exactly.
believe that there is no universal truth. Why there is no universal truth? Because what is truth? स्वरूप के अनुरूप होना ही सत्य है. That means your truth is different because what image you have. Suppose if you are meeting me and you are saying that I am person X, not Y, because you have my image in your mind. But if someone else has a different image, he may
No.
accept his at X. So this universal truth. So basically, if you see the truth, I believe personally, sorry to interrupt, that there is no universal truth.
Okay. My submission here is that there are principles and there are rules. The principles are universal truth. Rules are just to frame to meet those truths. Say for example, the person has to give you the correct chit for your parking and you
Hmm.
have to pay the money. The principle,
Hmm.
he's flouting the principle. He's not giving you the
Flaunting
correct
the principle.
correct chit. So the
Correct.
point here is he's flout. Rules can be changed, but principle cannot be changed.
Yes. Yes. So my take on truth, I think I agree to you. स्वरूप के अनुरूप होना ही सत्य है. I completely agree with that, and I also agree with the take on principles that there are certain principles basis which we live in the society. There are principles. The constitution has been set in, and basically we are all following that constitution. So in social setting, outsidely oriented world, the rules or the principles define our behavior. The principles that have been set as part of, let's say, a constitution or the system itself. स्वरूप के अनुरूप होना ही सत्य है. That is also right. That is also true. Because unless swa means swa, unless I understand myself, then how can I be with me? Anurup. मतलब अपनी तरह से. I'm sure some people may not understand Hindi, but let me try to translate it in English. Swaroop is my roop means this form that I have taken, my form. So Swaroop ke anuroop, meaning I am in completely in consonance with that personal form that I have taken, and that is the truth. So now then we have to understand our own self, and that is the universal truth. My universal truth may be different from somebody else's universal truth, and
Sir, nahi.
now
Agar
one is the one more thing, sir,
if this is
before.
the case, then there is no universal truth, no?
Yeah,
That is my
I'll
truth and
just,
your truth.
yes, no, I'll just say one more thing before we go to that debate. Now there is a deeper thing in swa. That swa means self. There is a deeper thing in that self, that all self is following nature's principle. So in that sense, nature is the truth, and nature, we know, is ever changing. It is taking form and shape, and kind of changing again and again. So then what is my swaroop is based on the nature at that moment. So let's say, for example, we had Guru Gobind Singh Prakash Parv yesterday. He was fighting an enemy, and he had to hide himself in a forest. At that time, he had to play a certain role. And at that time, maybe he was vegetarian, but he still had to eat non-vegetarian because there was no other food available. So I did something which I principally don't believe is right, uh, is against the nature, let's say. But in that moment, when I'm fighting an enemy, I have to take certain actions like sacrifice my children, sacrifice my food habits, and eat something which some completely different from what I believe in. So I do all of that, which means what? Nature took him to nature's principle. So nature's principle is very clear. Live in that moment. In nature, there is no past and future, right? Past and future is in my mind. In nature, there is no pleasure and pain. It just is. And it is there in that moment. It will not be there in the next moment. Next moment, something else will be there. So all Satya finally goes towards nature. And nature, or what we call Prakriti, let's say, the nature itself is the truth. And nature's truth is, let's say, when we come to this world, is, let's say, that ever changingness, the silence, or the when we go back to mindfulness, attention and awareness, receptive attention and presentness of the awareness is not changing. That's universal truth. So if I'm able to observe into the instance, that's where I'm aware. So that's my take. Of course, I please add to this particular take as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. My only submission is that, when we talk about the principle, we are talking about the two very basic principle of the universal truth is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam and Atmavat Sarva Bhuteshu. The
Yes,
Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam means the entire earth is my family. And Atmavat
absolutely.
Sarva Bhuteshu says that all living beings are my soul kin. Under such
Absolutely.
circumstances, based on these principles, if I am talking about the mindfulness, is that if I am passionate about my goal, I should not kill others to achieve that, because I am also a compassionate person. Where is my
Absolutely.
where is my compassion otherwise?
Yes. I think if we go, I mean, I'm slightly deviating here, but if we go slightly deeper into this subject, and we look at what Jesus said, the when that woman was getting stoned in that garden somewhere, and Jesus came, and the person who has never committed this crime should be the person who throws the stone first. So in a way, I mean, philosophically again, I'm from a management perspective, no, but philosophically again, what I see is that cheater who cheated was trying to cheat me yesterday is also my own reflection. So in a way, and you're right, Atma Bhuteshu. So they are all mirrors of us. Somewhere we are also behaving like them, maybe in some other situation. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a client, and then there is a maid at home. So the maid at home, I let's say asked her, somebody in the family asked her to go bring vegetables, and she took 10 rupees away. Instead of 40, she said 50. So she took away 10 rupees. Now, should I shout at her? Then I was reflecting. One of my team members, we are reporting time to our client. We are very open here. Somebody reported 2 hours extra. Are these not the two same things? These are two
Yeah.
exactly same things. So somewhere all of us are mirrors of each other, and our action should be based on that awareness that
Right.
somewhere the person I'm reacting to is also a mirror of me. So the basic learning here is I act on that person, I question that person, but with compassion, not with judgment that you are bad and I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
That's the
Agreed.
point. Yeah.
Agreed. 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 Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So coming back, how much time do we have, Tripti? Do we have some time now? 20
Yes,
minutes, right?
yes, please. Yes. 11 till
Okay.
11.
Okay. So I was coming back to our subject on organizations. Now, some of the organizations which have been deeply researched from a awareness point of view are these high reliability organizations. So high reliability organization, we all know firefighters and nurses in hospitals and air traffic control. How do they work? And that itself is a subject of a lot of research. How do these guys work? How do these guys mostly are right? They make fewer mistakes than any other industry. So we in the rest of the industry we'll see Six Sigma being implemented. Yeah, still mistakes are made, but in somehow in these institutions there are fewer mistakes than others. What is happening in these organizations that we should learn from an awareness point of view? And now when I talk about awareness here, I am talking from this nuanced judgment point of view, not the no judgment point of view. So nuanced judgment point of view, how do we use these techniques in even other organizations? So I think there are 4 or 5 key insights that come to mind when we talk about high reliability organization. First of all, they are pure and non-judgmental. Every problem is a new problem. So if you look at air accidents, each problem is treated uniquely. It has got no semblance with the events in the past. So they observe the phenomenon as it is without uh, putting a judgment to it, without classifying it into A kind of problems or B kind. Management people are so used to Pareto. They say, okay, A type of problems, B type of problems. Let's say solve A and B because these are the biggest problems. So they don't apply Pareto method. For them, each situation, each problem is a new problem. Each patient is a new patient. We have seen doctors and nurses who are less aware, we can experience them immediately, right? Because they are treating us like cattle, people coming in and going out who are patients. But we know that doctors and nurses who are good are attentive to myself. They are not trying to base observation on some other aspect. They have a reluctance to conceptualize. So in management, it is so simple to create frameworks. Okay, I have a framework for performance management. I have a framework for competencies. I have so many frameworks, but they have a deep reluctance to conceptualize. They don't create frameworks. They just treat every situation as it is. Less attention to plans, more to emergent outcomes. Plan is very important. Air traffic cannot move without a very, very solid plan. But a air traffic controller is not trained to look at just the plan. The air traffic controller is trained to observe the emergent aspects of uh, aspects of events that are happening continuously. So the air traffic controller is continuously looking at events, patterns, and the moment he finds a miss to the pattern, he will raise a red flag. Difference of expertise under specification of structure. So they will expertise is what is a good firefighter, a good nurse, a good air traffic controller. They will completely look at the expertise of the individual and relying on the individual and under specify the structure. There's not the structure is important, but it is not the important thing. The problem should go to the expert first. So to the best expert available. So that's how these organizations work. And how have they utilized this is a very interesting phenomenon. The patterns of awareness in these HROs. People pay more attention to failures. I mean, this is a big learning. Attention is to failure. Now, I'm talking from a nuanced judgment point of view, not from a no judgment point of view. And this is important when we are in a social setting. In the nuanced judgment, I'm more attentive to failures. Okay, what can fail? When I'm manufacturing a car, what can go wrong? That's the attention and awareness where I was talking from the activity perspective when I was on the previous slide. Simplicity, avoid simplicity rather than don't simplify. So a lot of times what happens is management principles, and I think this is a very important lesson for all the management institutions in particular. We try to, the moment we have cracked the code, we try to simplify it and put a stepwise procedure to do it. Now that is where we are generalizing things, and in generalizing is the problem. So when we generalize, we also generalize all the errors along with it, right? So the mistakes are embedded in the system. So any strategy you will see in organizations today is embedded with lots of errors. And these errors start right from the sales numbers. People will project that, okay, I'll sell so much next year. And then the errors start from there. So avoiding simplicity, avoiding generalization of problems. And they cultivate uniqueness. So in the HROs, you will see they will cultivate the uniqueness of situations. And good firefighters will be very intuitive. Good nurses will be very intuitive. Good air traffic controllers will be very intuitive. So those are the people who are groomed in the situation, who have deep observation. Sensitive to operations is they are not looking at long term, they are looking at now. Being sensitive to operation is being aware of now. What is happening? Which plane is where right now? Which airplane is where right now? Not which airplane will come tomorrow. So that's how they are sensitive, very sensitive to what is happening on the ground right now. Resilience. So they don't anticipate anything to happen. They just observe, and when something happens, they act. So again, there is no anticipation of the future. So you see, it's so beautiful. First of all, there is no past baggage because there is no simplicity. Second thing, there is observation to the presence because sensitivity to operations, and there is resilience because there is no expectation of the future. And in the most expeditious manner, they will get the best expert available. So I have a heart problem while I'm going through a kidney problem. I immediately an expert will come and attend to me. So allows decision to migrate to experts wherever they are located. So first of all, the 3 or 4 things very important which have happened here. One is past baggage is not there because there is no, I'm not trying to create systems which are very deep. Future anticipation is lower and lower. The view is on the present. And who is the best observer? So that's the last point. Allow decision to migrate to the experts. Who is the best person available? So there's no hierarchy. So in hospitals, you will see each time they try to create a hierarchy, they fail because it's so expertise driven. And that is how this is so beautiful. So observe. One aspect is observation outwardly, because this is about nuanced judgment. It's about present. It's not about the past and the future. There's no baggage. And my observation is to the aspect that what can fail, how not to let this person die, rather than how to make him live. So in those situations of emergency, so the attention is to the failures, not to the successes. And they don't treat failures as bad things. They don't treat failures as necessarily bad things. That's also a source of learning. So that's one of and there's a whole lot of research on HROs. Even if you go on Google Scholar, there is a lot of work which has been done on HROs. So I think from a social awareness point of view, I will definitely recommend you reading more about it. Of course, it is not possible to explain this entire concept in 5-10 minutes, but there is a lot of material and there is a lot of good quality studies which have been done in this space, and research is done in this space. So this is the pattern of social awareness from an HRO perspective. Then the other thing is, if I look at it from a more conceptual or uh, if I try to conceptualize these observations, they are not bothered about existing categories. They are creating newer and newer categories. Attention is to the context, some of the things that we discussed in the last slide. They don't try to specify, they avoid misunderstanding, misspecification, misestimation. So they are continuously aware of what is happening. Preserve detail. How can I preserve detail? I think this is a very important point. I think I can spend 2-3 minutes on this. How do I preserve detail? Unless I am present in the moment, I will never be able to preserve detail. So if I get two observers, one who has been, let's say, practicing, I think this is a great experiment to do. We get a set of observers, or let's say 10 observers who have been meditating, practicing meditation or some form of meditation in the last 5 years, and another source of observers who have not been practicing meditation, and average human beings who live their lives very, very normally. What will those people who have been meditating observe? And what are the people, normal people, observing? I'm sure there will be a distinction. The nuanced person, so the observer with the deep eye will observe a lot more details than the person who is normally observing. Why? Because the person is in the moment. Let's say if he is watching a tree, he's just watching that tree. So, or she is just watching that tree. So preserving detail is a very, very important aspect of organizations. Now, unfortunately, because of the management principles, generalization, processes, and systems, we have kind of killed that aspect and even made that a system. So Six Sigma and all of that and stuff like that. So preserving detail is one of the important aspects. Okay, moving forward, this is, you can also download and read this paper, but this sums up in a way from a workplace and the social perspective. So how the mindfulness has been studied. We ourselves saw in the conversations we had some time back on this in this room. So mindfulness has been studied from different perspectives. So I will skip through this very quickly because this is the meta work. This is what has happened in the last 25-30 years. So mindful has been studied as a trait, as a state, as practice, as an intervention. So people have studied it from different points of view. The heartfulness, mindfulness, awareness, industry. So they have created lots of interventions which make people more mindful. So they have studied it from different perspective, but mostly as a subset of the whole work of consciousness. The attention is on is from the point of view. Now this is the problem actually. This is a gap area in research because they have looked at attention from a stability, control, and efficiency perspective. While consciousness would say even unstable is good, even inefficient is good, even control is good. So while the research has mostly focused on or has been attentive to stability, control, and efficiency. So this in a way is a gap in the research over last 25-30 years. And then it has mostly dealt with mindfulness from a cognitive perspective, emotional perspective, behavioral and physiological perspective. So neuroplasticity and aging. So these are more applications, right? Applications of mindfulness rather than mindfulness itself, which is a much larger thing. So becoming better, having better stress response, having better self-regulation, having more, reducing the automaticity in me. So self-regulation, when you actually talk to a consciousness expert, he or she may say that don't regulate. Regulation maybe is actually suppressing you, and the suppression will cause even bigger behavioral issues later on. So, but this is how the functional domain has evolved, and in this evolution, it is mostly application oriented and stability oriented. From a work point of view, when we look at work, workplace, and people around us, there are certain answers which are more available. There are certain answers which are less available. So, from a well-being perspective, physical, psychological, behavioral, some of these things are studied, and outcomes are also published. Relationships are there. Communication quality, conflict management, empathy, and I'm sure you will dig deeper into the subject of empathy and compassion later on also. Leadership, teamwork. So from these perspective, relationships have been also studied, and some good research is available. Performance, job, tasks, citizenship behaviors, safety, etc. is also, like HRO, for example, is well studied. Things that are not, and these are very interesting things, which are a lot of open questions right now. I think buffering is a very important question. A lot of times, so the same example, let's say the ticket that I took yesterday from the parking lot guy, I may buffer, I may process it more, I may want to systematically resolve it rather than fighting at that moment. So, do I buffer my action uh, from the point of observation to the point of response? Remember that delay or the eighth habit, etc. So a lot of these things are less available. Goals and motivation levels, variability less. So when I say less available, meaning lesser linkage to mindfulness as of now. But there's more study which is possible in these areas. So some of these things, and this paper is available, thankfully, so I don't need to delve so much. You can actually read it as well. So this is in the organizational context and from a workplace context where we are working with others. Now, social awareness, if I have to and sum up in a way, the three aspects which are very deep. There can be different words for it when we talk about buffering as well. For example, distal view, horizon. How far do I look while looking at present? So that's the that at present. How do I look far? Far meaning maximum number of variables. So when I'm, for example, looking at a tree, let's say I'm a geologist, or I'm a botanist, and I'm looking at a tree. How deeply I look at it. Uh, what is my view of the whole? The distal view, in the sense that how big is the horizon of looking. Second is the aspect of empathy. I was talking about those overlaps, right? Empathy is within the overlaps uh, of two or multiple individuals. So my perspective, I am not, when I'm getting into a situation, let's say, for example, in a classroom, you would have 60, 70 students. Those 60, 70 are different students. They are all different beings. At an enhanced level of mindfulness, I will actually be able to act from all those 60 points of view. It's not do one by one. Empathy is not one by one issue. It's also one to many. So when I'm considering my action, I think about Lokesh, I think about Tripti, I think about Mohit. These are three names I definitely. So I think about so many people before I take that action. So that's the 360 perspective. Multiple views. There is there are some very good words for it. I'm not able to recall it right now, but basically a view which is not restricted to just me, but to everybody around me. And the third aspect is that of equanimity, which is about suspending that judgment, letting it, not judging it to be right, not judging it to be wrong, just listening and just being in that situation. So a good student is also good, a bad student is also good, just kind of watching them together with the same eye and being able to help them. So this sense of awareness generates two things: one, the compassion, and two, the willingness to help. And I think these are the two most important values in our society today: compassion and willingness to help without measuring it against an outcome of how much money I get. So these two things are possible if we practice these three more and more, equanimity, horizon, and empathy. So when I look at a student, I don't just as a student of class grade, let's just, but as a whole individual. What is that individual doing? What is the potential of that individual, etc., etc. So that's what it is from this point of view. Now, just to sum this up in a video, I have a video. Dr. Tripti, can I? Is it okay?
Yes, yes, sure. Rahul, please
Okay,
help in
all
this
right.
way.
So I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm sure.
I welcome Dr. Pawan Kumar Singh, sir. Uh, for the
Okay, you can see a screen, right? Yeah.
I'll request the participants to please switch off your audio so that there's less of disturbance, please. Thank you.
Are you able to view it and listen to it,
No, sir, no.
Dr. Tripti? Are you able to
Sir,
listen to it?
No video.
the video is not there. The slides is
All right.
visible
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm just switching it on. But could you listen to the audio at least?
Yes, audio we could listen. Switch off your audio. Yes, we can see the video.
Okay,
thank
so that's it from my side.
Thank you so much. Uh, in fact, we have I have very little to add to this, especially after the summary video, and I'm sure the participants had a good question in between question and answer sessions. There are a lot of issues that we have discussed. Definitely, it's not only related to management, some components from philosophy, some from psychology, and definitely there are a lot of social aspects that have been, discussed. And that was a very beautiful summary video, I must say. And I'm sure at the end of this workshop, when we at the end of this faculty development program, I'm sure we'll carry these emotions forward. And thank you very much, Lokesh ji. Definitely, it has been a very enriching experience, and I'm sure participants also have quite a lot to share. You can always be connected, and definitely your learning journey would be very enriching. So, with this, I close this session. Just a few minutes break, or if the participants are motivated, we can start the session right away also.